Hello, Blue Valley. This is Mr. Hume, librarian at Blue Valley Middle School, and I'm here with another First Chapter Friday. And today I'm going to do read from a book called The Weight of Our Sky. If you watched any of my First Chapter Fridays, you probably realize that I really like realistic fiction and historical fiction, and this is another from that genre. I just always seem to end up picking up those books. And another thing I like to do when I read is I like to learn about new places and learn about things that I've never heard anything about before. And this is about a conflict that happened between two nations in Asia and in 1969, and the way it affected many people's lives, and it definitely had an effect on the author. So I'm going to do something I normally don't do. I'm going to read the author's note that starts at the beginning of the book because I think it was kind of interesting, and then I'll read the first chapter for you. So this is from The Weight of Our Sky by Hannah Alkaf. Author's note. Even before I begin to say anything else, I'm going to say this. This book is not a light and easy read. And in the interest of minimizing harm, I'd like to warn you now that its contents can include graphic violence, death, racism, OCD, and anxiety triggers. If any of this is distressing for you at this time, I'd recommend either waiting until you're in the right space to take on all of that or forgoing it altogether. Is that weird for an author to basically say, please don't read my book? Maybe, but I mean it. If this will hurt you, please don't read my book. No book is worth sacrificing your own well being for. Are you still here? Did you get this far? If you did, thank you. I appreciate you. I would have whether or not you kept going, but I'm going even more grateful because it wasn't so long ago that a book like this would never have even made it as far as an editor's desk, much less exist in the tangible typeset form you hold in your hands right now, a dream made real. I appreciate you because you will now hear witness to the events that have shaped my beloved Malaysia into the country it is today. The events of May 13th, 1969, when in the wake of a contentious general election when opposition parties won unexpected victories at the expense of the ruling coalition, the Malays and the Chinese clashed in a bloody battle in the streets of Kuala Lumpur, in flames and fiery stroked by political interest. 1 week later, the death toll climbed to 196, the official number, though Western diplomatic sources at the time suggested it was closer to 600, and the powers that had been an excuse to put policies in place that differentiated between racial groups and kept those at the top firmly, comfortably aloft in their airy cushions of privilege, policies with repercussions that we still live with to this day. I appreciate you because without your eyes, your attention, your willingness to listen, as the memories and voices of those who lived through it begin to fade, this seminal point in our past becomes nothing more than a couple of paragraphs in our textbooks, lines stripped of meaning, made to regurgitate in exams and not stick in your throat or pierce your heart with the intensity of its horror. I appreciate you because this is our story, and without an audience, a story dies, and we cannot afford to let it. I can't say all of what you're about to read is true. This is a work of fiction, after all, and even in nonfiction, so much relies on the memories of the traumatized survivors and the words of those who write the history books, and both of those can lie. So I will say that many, many hours of research went into this, including wading through reams of articles, both academic and non, first person interviews, expert advice, and more. You'll notice themes you might find unbelievable in a modern context, like the fact that the Maladi would have believed she was being controlled by a jinn instead of consulting a mental health professional. But this was 1969. There was little treatment available for OCD in Kuala Lumpur then, and even if there was also a heavy cloud of stigma associated with seeing a psychiatrist, with many holding the belief they would be institutionalized, or worse still, lobotomized for being crazy. It wasn't uncommon then to seek traditional or religious treatment for illnesses you couldn't quite explain to your regular doctor. In fact, it's not uncommon now either. As you read, you will also want to keep in mind that for Muslims, jinn are real. They aren't just wacky blue creatures with a Robin Williams voice or mythical beings that pour out of old lamps and ancient rings to grant you 3 wishes. They exist for us in ways that may not be for you. And now that I have said all this, I leave it to you, dear reader, to forge on and make the story what you will. I appreciate you still always. Love, Hannah, who is the author of the book. Okay, if you decide to read on, let's move on. Chapter 1. By the time school ends today on Tuesday, my mother has died 17 times. On the way to school, she was run over by a runaway lorry. her insides smeared across the black tar road like so much strawberry jelly. During English, while we recite a poem to remember our parts of speech, an interjection cries out, "Hark! I need an exclamation point!" Our teacher, Miss Lalitha, declaims, gesturing us for follow, pulling out the most dramatic faces. She is caught in a crossfire between police and gang members and is killed by a stray bullet straight through her chest, blood blossoming in delicate blooms all above her crisp white nurse's uniform. At recess, she accidentally ingests some sort of dire poison and dies screaming in agony, her face purple, the corners of her open mouth flecked with white foam and spittle. And as we peruse our geography textbooks, my mother is stabbed repeatedly by robbers, the wicked blades of their parang sliding through her flesh as though it were butter. I know the signs. This is the jinn unfolding himself, something stretching out, pricking me gently with his clawed fingers. "See what I can do," he whispers, unfurling yet another death scene in all its technicolor glory. "See what happens when you disobey?" They float to the top of my consciousness, unbidden in the most random times, and set off a chain reaction through my entire body. Cold sweat, damp palms, racing heart, nausea, lightheadedness, the sensation of 1,000 needles pricking me from head to toe. It seems difficult now to believe that there was ever a time when the only jinns I believe in came from fairy tales, benevolent creatures that poured like smoke from your humble old oil lamps and antique rings, granted to your heart's desire, then disappeared when the transaction was complete. I might even have daydreamed of fiddling with one some day, and later they took a different shape, one informed by religious teachers and Quran recitation classes, creatures of smoke and fire, who had their own realm on earth and kept to themselves for the most part. I didn't realize they could be sharp, cruel, insidious little things that crept and wormed their way into your thoughts and made your brain hot and itchy. The clanging of the final bell echoes through our school corridors. Tarima Kashika go. The class sings songs their thank yous in unison as Mr. Lim nods and strides briskly out the door in her severe, high-necked navy blue dress, the blackboard covered in complicated mathematical formulas, the floor before it covered in chalk dust. I stuff my books hurriedly into my bag, smiling half-heartedly and waving as the other girls pass by. "Bye, Mel. See you tomorrow." And I concentrate on the task at hand. Biggest to smallest, pencil case in the right hand pocket, tap each item 3 times before closing the bag. 1, 2, 3. Something feels off. My hands are frozen, suspended above my belongings. Did I do that right? Did I tap 3 times or 4? I break out into a light sweat. Again, the gin whispers again. Think how much better you'll feel when you finally get it. Now I tell my family, trying to ignore the way past my finger twitch, the wave of panic raising from my stomach. "Yes," he says. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Well? I look up startled. My best friend, Sophia, is standing on my desk, rocking back and forth eagerly on her heels, quivering with high excitement from the tips of her toes to the tip of her perfectly perky ponytail, tied back with a link of white ribbon. Perfectly perky is actually a great description of Saf in general, who my mother often jokes only ever has 2 modes, happy and asleep. She bounces away through her days, dispensing ready smiles, compliments, and high fives to all and sundry, while I trail along in her wake, awkward, vaguely melancholy, and in a constant state of self-embarrassment. I'm pretty sure Saf is the reason I have friends at all. Well, what? Saf's face falls. "Don't you tell me you forgot. You, me, Paul, remember?" "Oh, that." My heart sinks. The last thing I want to do right now is be trapped in the dark, stuffy recesses of the neighborhood cinema as everyone else watches one movie and the gin forces me to watch another. Do we really have to, Saf? I sling my bag over my shoulder and make for the door. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. There is a very specific pattern to adhere to, a rhythm that's smooth and soothing, like the waltzes Mama listens to on the radio on Sunday afternoons, a method to the madness. Not that this is madness, it's the gin. "Of course we do," Saf carries along beside me, taking 2 steps for every one of my strides. "You promised. And anyway, I always back you up when it's something to do with your Paul. You can leave Paul McCartney out of this. Right foot first out the door. Good. Or any of the Beatles for that matter," I add as an afterthought. I mean, I'm a little iffy about Ringo, but even he's better than Paul Newman. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. "Come on, Mel, please." Her tone is wheeling now. "You know it has to be today. Her dad's at some kind of meeting until late. He'll never let me go otherwise. You know how he feels about movies. She screws up her face and lowers her voice in a dead-on imitation of her father. Movies? Movies dull the mind, Sophia, yet they are the refuge of the uncultured and the uneducated. They erode your morals. I snort with laughter in spite of myself. Fine, I say grudgingly. It's not like Mama expects me home at any time anyway. She's on shift at the hospital until tonight. But can't we go to Cathay or the pavilion? At least they aren't so far. We could just walk. Saf shakes her head firmly. The wreck, she says. We have to go to the wrecks. I shoot her a glance. This wouldn't have anything to do with the fact that Jason's father's sugar cane still happens to be right across the street from there, right? I don't know what you're talking about, Saf says innocently, playing with the frayed end of her hair ribbon and doing her best not to look up at me, a blush spreading like wildfire across her dimpled cheeks. I just really happen to prefer watching movies at the Rex. I can't help but grin. Saf can fool a lot of people with those good girl looks and that demure smile, but then again, most people haven't been friends with her since the age of 7, when she marched right up to me on the first day of primary school, while everyone else stood around looking nervous and unsure, and declared cheerfully, I like you, let's be best friends. On the surface, we're polar opposites. She is bright where I am dim, cheery smiles where I am worried frowns, pleasing plumpness where I am sharp, uncomfortable angles, but maybe that's why we fit so perfectly. You are so obvious, I snigger, jabbing at her ribs, and we dissolve into giggles as we run for the bus. I hoist myself up the steps, right foot first, good girl, Mel, and the gin suddenly rears up, ready and alert. I feel a sickening weight in my stomach. The right-hand window seat in my third row, my usual choice, the safest choice, is occupied. A Chinese auntie with her loose short-sleeved blouse boasting dark patches of sweat dozes in the afternoon heat. Whenever she leans too far forward, she quickly jerks her head back, her eyes opening for a split second, her face rearranging itself into something resembling propriety. But before long, she's nodding off again, lulled by the gentle rolling of the bus. I can feel the panic start to descend, that telltale pricking starting in my toes and working its way up to claim the rest of me. If you don't sit in that seat, the safe seat, Mama will die, the gin whispers, and I hate how familiar this voice is in my ears, that low, rich rasp like gravel wrapped in velvet. Mama will die, and it will be your fault. I don't know. I know it doesn't make sense. I know it shouldn't matter. But at the same time, I'm absolutely certain that nothing matters more than this. Not a single thing in the entire world. My chest heaves up and down, up and down. Quickly, I slide into the window seat on the left. Still third row, which is good, but on the left, which is definitely, terribly, awfully not good. But I can make it right, if I can make it safe. The old blue bus coughs and wheezes its way down the road and the Saf waxes lyrical about the dreamy swoop of Paul Newman's perfect hair and heavenly blue of his perfect eyes. My mother is floating, floating, floating down into the depths of the claying river, her face blue, her eyes shut, her lungs filled with murky water. Quickly, quietly, so that Saf won't notice, I tap my right foot, and then my left, and then right again, 33 sets of 3 altogether, all the way to Peddling Street. Finally, the gin subsides, for now. Okay, so that's the first chapter of The Weight of the Sky, which is about a young girl living in Malaysia at a very critical time in their history, and some of the problems that she's dealing with. So if you're interested in reading the rest of that book and finding out how it goes, pick it up in your local library. Thank you very much for listening.